The glass lake did not drown women who lied. That was the first lie the court told about it. The second was that Isolde Maren had come to the water to prove whether she had ever been Alpha King Rowan Veyne's true mate. She had not come willingly at all. 2 royal guards held her beneath the white moon arch, while the entire northern pack waded along the frozen bank, their black cloaks pulled tight against the wind. Silver lanterns burned over the lake without flickering. No snow fell, yet the air tasted of winter and old vows. Behind Isolde, on a stone altar, lay the broken half of her Luna circlet. It had been cut from her hair less than an hour ago. Not torn, cut. Cleanly, publicly, with the same ceremonial blade once used to crown her. That had hurt more than blood. Alpha King Rowan Veyne stood at the edge of the lake steps in black wolf armor, pale hair tied away from a face made severe by crown and cold. His eyes were gray as storm ice. Once, those eyes had warmed when they found her across a crowded hall. Once, his hand had searched for hers beneath council tables where no one could see. Once, he had kissed the inside of her wrist and sworn that no law written by frightened elders would teach his wolf to forget her. Tonight, he looked at her as if she were a name removed from a record. Isolde Maren, Moon, Healer Cerevra Lorne called, her white staff resting against the stone. Do you still claim the Alpha King's mate bond? The pack went silent. The question was not mercy. It was a blade with velvet tied around the handle. If Isolde said no, she would live as the rejected Luna who confessed her bond false. If she said yes, they would cast her into Glass Lake, where broken vows were said to sink liars until their lungs filled with shining cold. But the bond in her chest had not broken. It ached. It bled. It dragged against her ribs like a silver thread trapped beneath ice. Yet it remained. Isolde lifted her chin. I claim what was never broken. A murmur moved through the pack. Cerevra's beautiful face softened with practiced sorrow. Then let the lake receive the wound your mouth refuses to release. Rowan did not speak. That silence struck Isolde harder than the guard's hands. She looked at him one last time, searching for even a flicker of the man who had once pulled her behind the wolf-bannered pillars and whispered her name like prayer. Nothing answered. Not love, not hatred, not grief, only absence. The guards threw her into the glass lake. The surface did not splash. It opened. Isolde dropped through a skin of silver water so smooth it felt like falling through a mirror. Cold seized her body at once. Her gown bloomed around her in pale folds. Above, the watching pack blurred into dark shapes beyond a ceiling of moonlit glass. The lake pulled her downward. Not angrily. Precisely. It knew how to take breath from bone. Isolde fought the first urge to gasp. Her lungs clenched. Her hair streamed around her face. The broken mate bond, or what the court had named broken, flared inside her chest with a pain so bright she nearly opened her mouth. Then the lake touched that pain and stopped. The downward pull vanished. For one impossible heartbeat, Isolde hung weightless beneath the surface, while the water around her turned perfectly still. Not judging, listening. A thin white line opened beneath her palm. Another crossed it, then another. The lake began to freeze, but not over her like a tomb. The ice formed under her knees first, then behind her back, then around her arms in curved, transparent shapes. It lifted her, not from pity, not from mercy, but because something in the mate bond had disturbed what slept beneath the water. Isolde broke through the surface with a gasp. The lake raised her higher. The pack cried out as a throne of glassy ice formed around her, clear as frozen moonlight. It held her above the water, wet hair clinging to her face, her hands pressed against the luminous arms of ice. She should have looked condemned. Instead, the lake had seated her like a queen, carved from its own memory. Cerevra still. Rowan took one step down the stone stairs. For the first time that night, something changed in his face. Not recognition. Pain before recognition. The ice beneath Isolde's hand darkened. A reflection opened inside it. The pack leaned forward, expecting the lake to show Isolde's deceit. It did not show Isolde at all. It showed Rowan. He stood in the frost garden months earlier, cloakless beneath falling snow, one hand pressed against a bleeding cut on his palm. Isolde stood before him in the memory, shaking from fear after a silverblade assassin had tried to reach her through the winter hedges. Rowan wrapped his cloak around her shoulders and touched his bloodied hand to her cheek. If the lake ever asks for truth, the memory of Rowan whispered, give it mine. The real Rowan staggered back. A sound passed through the gathered pack, soft and frightened. Isolde could not move inside the frozen throne. Her heart slammed against her ribs. That night had happened. She had not dreamed it. He had said those words with his mouth against her hair, while his wolf trembled under his skin, as if it had nearly lost something it had already chosen. Rowan stared at the ice as if watching a stranger wear his face. I do not remember this, he said. Cerevra's fingers tightened around her staff. Isolde heard it then. Not the words. The crack. Somewhere beneath Glass Lake, something old had shifted around Rowan's forgotten vow. The lake was not testing her. It was opening him. Another image spread through the ice at Isolde's feet. Rowan asleep on a black stone table. Moon thread wrapped around his temples. Cerevra standing over him with both hands lowered toward his closed eyes. The reflection blurred before the full memory could form. Cerevra struck her staff against the bank. Enough. The ice throne trembled, but Glass Lake did not obey. Beneath Isolde, under layers of frozen silver, a dark shape opened like an eye. And from the deep water below her feet, Rowan Veyne's stolen voice whispered, do not let me forget her. Rowan's stolen voice rose from beneath the lake like a hand through ice. Do not let me forget her. The words did not echo across the bank. They entered the frozen throne, traveled through the glass under Isolde's palms, and reached the watching pack as a vibration in bone and breath. No one could pretend they had not felt it. Wolves along the shore lowered their heads without meaning to. Several elders stepped back from the water, as if the lake had opened a mouth beneath their feet. Isolde could not move. The ice held her gently, but completely. Not a prison. Not yet. More like hands keeping her from sinking while something older than the pack searched through the wound in her bond. Rowan stood on the steps below the moon arch, staring at the dark eye beneath the ice. His face had lost its cold perfection. I said that? He asked. No one answered. Cerevra Lorne struck her staff against the stone again. The lake is reflecting her desire. A rejected Luna can poison water with longing if the bond wound remains fresh. The explanation came too quickly. Isolde heard fear beneath it. So did the lake. The ice at her right hand cleared into another reflection. Rowan appeared again, younger by only months, but altered by warmth. He stood in the library of the northern keep, one hand braced on a shelf, laughing softly as Isolde reached past him for a book too high for her. He took it down, but did not give it to her. Instead, he held it above his shoulder, forcing her to step closer. The memory was small. That was why it hurt. No crown, no ceremony, no danger. Only a stolen private moment in candlelight. You are cruel, my king, the memory of Isolde said. No, the memory of Rowan answered, his voice low enough that half the court leaned forward to hear. I am keeping you near me, by whatever dishonorable means remain. The real Rowan's hand closed around the stone rail. The reflection fractured. A second image appeared beneath it. Rowan asleep on the black table, jaw clenched, wrists bound with moon thread. Cerevra stood over him, not in healer's white, but in a dark silver robe stitched with lake symbols. Her hands hovered near his temples. Behind her, a shallow bowl held water so still, it looked like a cut piece of Glass Lake. The memory shivered before her face could turn. Cerevra lifted her staff. Do not look, she commanded. The pack obeyed badly. That was enough. The lake darkened. Isolde felt a pull inside her chest. The mate bond stretched toward Rowan, not asking for reunion, not pleading for love, only straining toward what had been stolen from him. She wanted to hate him. She had prepared herself to hate him when the guards threw her into the water. Hate would have been easier than seeing his confusion, because Rowan did not look like a man caught lying. He looked like a man standing before the ruins of his own heart, unable to remember building them. He descended one more step. Cerevra turned sharply. Majesty, do not approach the water. Rowan did not look at her. Why? The lake has already taken hold of her wound. No, his voice lowered. It has taken hold of mine. The words loosened something in the pack. A murmur spread along the bank, frightened and disobedient. Isolde saw doubt passing from face to face. Not mercy yet, but unease. They had come to watch a false Luna drown. Instead, the water was pulling their king apart in reflections. Cerevra raised her chin. You rejected her before witnesses. I remember that. Then trust what you remember. Rowan's gaze shifted to her. For the first time that night, his suspicion did not fall on Isolde. Why is that the only thing I remember clearly? Cerevra then still. The lake answered before she did. Ice spread from Isolde's throne across the surface in branching white lines. Each branch carried a fragment of Rowan's voice. I know your steps before you enter. My wolf quiets when you sleep near the hearth. If I ever wound you in public, look for the hand holding the knife behind me. Isolde's breath caught. She remembered that last vow. The night before the rejection, Rowan had come to her chamber after council. He had been pale, restless, his wolf pacing beneath his skin. He had held her wrists and told her that if he ever spoke cruelly before the court, she must not believe the cruelty first. She had laughed then, softly, because she thought love made such fears unnecessary. Now the lake gave the vow back with ice around it. Rowan closed his eyes. Pain moved across his face, but no memory followed, only the knowledge of absence. Cerevra stepped toward the water. This is enough. The lake is unstable. She lifted her staff and pressed its moonstone tip into the frozen edge. White cracks shot toward Isolde. The throne tightened around her ribs. She gasped. Rowan's eyes opened. Stop. She must be removed before the lake spreads into the pack bond. Isolde felt the ice growing colder. Cerevra was not trying to free her. She was trying to seal the reflection before it reached whatever lay deeper. The dark eye under Isolde's feet blinked. Then the lake showed a different memory. Not love. The rejection. Rowan stood in the great hall before the northern court, wearing the same black armor he wore now. Isolde stood before him in her Luna circlet, confused, already afraid. Cerevra stood behind the throne with one hand hidden in her sleeve. The memory slowed. As Rowan opened his mouth to reject the bond, silver thread slid from Cerevra's sleeve across the floor. It wrapped around his shadow, not his body. His wolf shadow stiffened, his eyes turned empty. Then he spoke. I reject the bond. The ice cracked beneath the watching pack. The real Rowan staggered, as if the words had been driven back into him blade first. Isolde stared at the reflection, unable to breathe. The rejection had not come from his wolf. It had been spoken through a shadow held still. Cerevra's face hardened. The lake lies. Rowan turned toward her slowly. But before he could speak, the frozen throne around Isolde began to sink. Not downward into drowning. Downward into memory. The lake opened beneath her like a glass stair, and the ice pulled her below the surface while keeping her seated upright, luminous and trapped. The dark eye widened into a corridor of water under the lake bed, filled with drifting silver threads. At the far end of that drowned corridor, something human-shaped knelt beneath chains of ice. Rowan took one step toward the water. The shape beneath the lake lifted its head. It had his face, and its eyes were full of every memory he had lost. The lake did not pull Isolde down like a drowning woman. It carried her like a secret being returned to its hiding place. The frozen throne sank beneath the surface, still holding her upright, its clear arms wrapped around her waist and shoulders with the cold patience of old magic. Water closed over her head, yet no water entered her lungs. She could breathe in small silver threads that rose from the ice itself, each breath tasting faintly of snow, wolf, fur, and promises spoken too close to midnight. Above, the pack became blurred shadows on the lake's ceiling. Rowan stood at the edge. Even through the water, Isolde saw him move. One step toward her, then another. Cerevra caught his arm. The lake dimmed between them, but not before Isolde saw Rowan look down at the healer's hand, as if he had only just realized how often it had been placed between him and his own instincts. Below Isolde, the drowned corridor opened wider. It was not made of stone. It was made of frozen reflections. Each wall held a memory that had been peeled thin and pressed into ice. Rowan laughing in torchlight, Rowan asleep beside a dying fire, Rowan riding through winter woods with Isolde's hand hidden under his cloak, Rowan standing outside her chamber door with blood on his sleeve because he had killed the man sent to take her. None of these moments looked grand enough to change a kingdom. That made them worse. They were small memories, private ones, the kind a stolen mind might survive without, but a heart would limp from losing. The frozen throne carried Isolde to the human-shaped figure kneeling at the corridor's end. It wore Rowan's face, but not his armor. This Rowan was barefoot on the glass floor, dressed in a dark tunic torn at the throat, silver threads wrapped around his wrists, temples, and shadow. His head was bowed, pale hair hanging over his eyes. Behind him, a wolf-shaped darkness lay pinned beneath the ice. Isolde's hands tightened on the arms of the throne. Rowan? The kneeling figure lifted its head. His eyes were full of her, not only seeing her, remembering her. The force of it nearly broke her. There was the night he first knew she was his mate, when he found her in the rain courtyard with a bleeding hand and ordered every healer away because his wolf would not let anyone else touch her. There was the winter feast where he chose her over 3 noble alliances and smiled only after the hall emptied. There was the morning he placed the Luna circlet in her hands instead of on her head and said, "I will not crown you before asking whether you want the weight." Isolde made a sound that was almost a sob. The real Rowan above did not remember those things. This one did. The kneeling memory of him strained against the threads. His mouth moved. No sound came. The ice around his throat brightened, showing a thin line of moon thread stitched beneath his skin. Cerevra had not only stolen memories, she had silenced the part of him that still held them. Isolde leaned forward, fighting the throne's grip. "What did she do to you?" The memory Rowan's eyes flicked toward the wolf shadow pinned behind him. The lake answered through reflection. A new scene opened on the corridor wall. Rowan lay on the black stone table from the earlier reflection, unconscious but restless, his wolf shadow thrashing beneath him. Cerevra stood beside him with a bowl of glass lake water and a needle made of white bone. Around the chamber, 3 elders held candles that burned blue. "He will never reject her while the wolf remembers," one elder said. Cerevra dipped the needle into the lake water. "Then we do not cut the bond. We remove the path to it." She pressed the needle to Rowan's temple. His sleeping body arched. His wolf shadow tried to reach for something beyond the table. For someone. "For Isolde," Cerevra whispered. "Love is only dangerous when it can find its own name." The memory cracked. Above the lake, thunder rolled without clouds. Isolde saw Rowan break free from Cerevra's grip on the bank. He stepped onto the frozen surface. The lake did not crack beneath him. It recognized his weight. Cerevra shouted something to the elders, but their voices warped through the water. The frozen corridor trembled. Memory Rowan lifted his bound hands again, desperate now. Silver threads cut deeper into his wrists. Behind him, the pinned wolf shadow opened one eye, storm gray, furious, starved. Isolde understood then why the mate bond still hurt inside her. It was not reaching for the Rowan who had rejected her. It was reaching for the Rowan buried beneath him. She pressed both palms against the ice arms of the throne. "Let me out." The lake did not. Instead, it showed her another reflection. Herself on the rejection floor, hearing Rowan's cold words. But this time the memory slowed before the rejection. Cerevra's moon thread did not only wrap Rowan's shadow, it also entered the lake beneath the hall, sinking through hidden channels into the same drowned corridor where Isolde now sat. The thread dragged something behind it, a bright, living strand between Rowan and Isolde. The mate bond, not broken, anchored under the lake. Isolde stared in horror as the thread was knotted around Memory Rowan's throat. The lake had not refused to drown her because she was innocent. It had refused because drowning her would have drowned the last living half of the bond. Above, Rowan had reached the center of the lake. His boots stood over the dark eye. Cerevra's voice cut across the surface, sharp enough to reach even below. "Majesty, if you go under, you may not return with the man you are now." Rowan looked down through the ice. Their eyes met through the water. For the first time since his rejection, Isolde saw fear in him. Not fear of her. Fear that the self he had been taught to trust was the false one. He placed one hand against the frozen surface. The corridor shook. Memory Rowan lifted his bound hand at the same time. Both palms aligned with Isolde between them, the real king above, the stolen king below, and her trapped in the wound where they had been split. Cerevra struck her staff into the ice. A white fracture raced toward Rowan's feet. The lake screamed, not in sound, in reflection. Every hidden memory flashed at once, too fast to understand Rowan kissing Isolde's brow, Rowan bleeding for her, Rowan begging Cerevra not to take something, Rowan's wolf howling under glass. Then the ice beneath the real Rowan opened. He fell into the lake. Isolde cried out, but the throne would not release her. The water swallowed him in a column of silver bubbles. Memory Rowan's chains snapped tight, and the pinned wolf shadow behind him began to rise. Rowan did not sink like a man cast into punishment. He fell as if the lake had been waiting for his weight. Silver water closed over him, swallowing the black shine of his armor and the pale flash of his hair. The frozen surface sealed above his head without a splash. On the bank, the pack shouted. Elders rushed toward the moon arch. Cerevra Lorne stood perfectly still, one hand clenched around her white staff, her face no longer gentle enough to be called a healer's. Below the ice, Isolde watched Rowan descend. The frozen throne held her in place. Every instinct in her body pulled toward him. The mate bond inside her chest flared so sharply that the ice around her ribs cracked, not broken, answering. The lake had trapped her because she carried the living half of what Cerevra had hidden. Now, the stolen half was falling toward them. Rowan's eyes opened underwater. For one terrible breath, he looked like the king from the shore. Cold, confused, furious at a world shifting beneath him. Then he saw the corridor. He saw himself kneeling at the far end, bound in silver moon thread. The real Rowan stopped struggling. The memory Rowan lifted his head. Between them, the pinned wolf shadow rose higher from the ice, its shape enormous and gaunt, fur made of storm-dark mist, eyes burning with the same gray pain that had once watched Isolde from across council chambers when words could not reach her. Cerevra's voice sliced down from above, distorted by ice. Rowan, do not follow it. That thing is only lake shadow. It will feed on your grief. The real Rowan looked upward. For one moment, Isolde saw old obedience move through him. Not weak obedience, conditioned obedience. A king trained to distrust any feeling that contradicted the memory left in his head. Then memory Rowan struck his bound fists against the ice. The corridor filled with a soundless impact. A reflection burst open beside Isolde. Rowan stood in the old wolf chapel, not crowned yet, one knee on the floor before her. Snow blew through the broken windows. He held a strip of silver cloth in both hands. I do not ask you to belong beneath me, he said in the memory. I ask whether you will stand where my enemies must look before they strike. Isolde's breath broke. She remembered laughing through tears, because no alpha in the Northern Kingdom had ever proposed a lunabond with a warning instead of a jewel. The real Rowan stared at the image. His lips parted. I remember the chapel, he whispered. The silver threads around memory. Rowan's wrists tightened violently. He convulsed. The wolf shadow snarled and lunged upward, but ice chains burst from the corridor floor and dragged it down by the throat. The lake darkened around them. Cerevra had not only hidden memories, she had built guards around them. Rowan reached for the image. It shattered before his fingers touched it. Pain tore through his face. Cerevra's staff struck the ice above again. Majesty, come back now, or I will seal the lake to save you. Isolde turned her head toward the blurred surface. Save him from what? Cerevra could not hear her. The lake could. Another reflection opened, this one colder than the rest. Cerevra stood alone in a chamber beneath the healer's tower, speaking to 3-pack elders. On a table before her lay Rowan's signet ring, Isolde's Luna ribbon, and a bowl of glass lake water. If Rowan keeps her, one elder said, glass, blood, returns through the throne. Cerevra's mouth tightened. Then every vow this pack has buried will wake. Old vows should stay drowned. They will, Cerevra said. If he rejects her with a clean face and no memory of why it hurts. The reflection froze. Isolde stared at the healer through the ice, her horror sharpening into something steadier. Glass blood. The word moved through the water and settled against her skin. She had heard it once as a childhood insult from an old servant who crossed herself whenever Isolde cried near wash water, a girl whose tears made basins ripple, a child whose blood, when cut, turned rainwater silver for one heartbeat. Her mother had slapped the servant silent and told Isolde never to bleed near still water. Now the lake remembered what her own family had hidden. Rowan looked at her through the corridor. Isolde. It was the first time he had spoken her name since throwing her into the lake. Not coldly, not as judgment, as if the name had survived somewhere under the wound. The frozen throne cracked around her left hand. She pulled. Ice bit her wrist, but one arm came free. The mate bond flared between them, visible now as a pale silver line running from her chest into the ice, through Memory Rowan's throat and up toward the real Rowan's heart. Rowan saw it. His face changed. Not healed, not restored, haunted. "I rejected you," he said. "Yes, I remember doing it. Yes." His eyes lowered to the bound memory of himself. "But I do not remember choosing to." The words struck the corridor. The lake floor shuddered. Memory Rowan opened his mouth, and this time sound escaped, torn and hoarse. "Cut the thread at my throat. Isolde still." The silver mate line was knotted around Memory Rowan's neck, binding his stolen love, his wolf, and the rejection into one cruel knot. If she cut it wrong, she might free him, or sever the bond forever. Cerevra must have understood what the lake had shown, because her voice came down in a sudden command. "Rowan Veyne, by healer's right and crown survival, wake." The real Rowan jerked upward, as if dragged by an invisible hook. Isolde reached for him. Too far. The wolf shadow rose fully behind Memory Rowan, snapping one ice chain with its teeth. Its storm-gray eyes fixed on Isolde's free hand. Not begging, choosing. The frozen throne cracked again. Isolde tore her other hand loose. Pain flashed white through her arms, but she leaned forward and gripped the silver knot at Memory Rowan's throat. Above them, the real Rowan stopped rising. Cerevra screamed. The knot cut into Isolde's palms. Water around her turned red, then silver. Glass Lake opened every stolen vow at once. And on the bank above, every wolf in the northern pack heard Rowan's buried voice say, "I never rejected her." The buried voice did not rise from Rowan's mouth. It rose from the lake. Every wolf on the bank heard it through the soles of their feet, through the ice under the moon arch, through the cold mist gathering above the water. The words entered them like a vow returning after burial. "I never rejected her." The pack did not move. Even fear seemed to stop breathing. Below the surface, Isolde held the silver knot at Memory Rowan's throat, while her own blood streamed from her palms into the water. The blood should have clouded red. Instead, it turned bright silver, thinning into delicate lines that spread through the drowned corridor like cracks in glass. The lake changed around her. Not deeper, older. Every frozen wall began to show vows. Not only Rowan's, not only hers. Half-spoken promises from generations of the northern pack slid through the ice like fish beneath winter. Marriage vows altered by council pressure. Exile oaths forced from trembling mouths. Surrender terms rewritten after blood had dried. Mate bonds declared false because they threatened inheritance. Isolde nearly released the knot. Too much. The lake had found her blood and recognized an old door. Memory Rowan's eyes fixed on hers. "Do not let it take everything." His voice was hoarse, scraped raw by years of silence under ice. "What is happening?" she whispered. His gaze flicked to the silver spreading from her hands. "It remembers through you." Above them, the real Rowan pressed both palms against the frozen ceiling of the corridor. His face was pale through the water, his eyes locked on the knot at his stolen self's throat. He looked as if he were watching his own soul strangled by another person's mercy. "Isolde," he said, voice broken by water. "Do not cut until I can hold it." Cerevra's staff struck the ice from above. A white shock ran through the lake. The drowned corridor lurched. The throne around Isolde's waist tightened, and the silver knot sliced deeper into her palms. She clenched her teeth to keep from crying out. On the bank, Cerevra's voice rang clear. "The lake is infected. Glass blood has awakened." The elders recoiled. Glass blood. This time, the word did not feel like an insult from a forgotten childhood kitchen. It landed in the lake like a name the water had waited to hear. Cerevra lifted her staff toward the gathered pack. "You felt the danger. Every vow beneath this lake is stirring. If she opens them, no bond, no title, no treaty, no inheritance remains safe." That fear reached the shore faster than truth. The pack began to murmur. A commander shouted, "Bring the king out." Another voice answered, "And the woman?" No one replied. Isolde heard the silence through the ice. There it was again, the old shape of survival. Save the king. Leave the cursed bride under the water. Call it tragedy before it could become guilt. Rowan heard it too. His expression sharpened. He turned away from the ceiling and swam downward toward her. Cerevra's command followed him like a hook. Rowan Veyne, return to your pack. He flinched. For 1 second, the threads around memory, Rowan's throat tightened, and the real Rowan's body jerked upward. Cerevra still had a path into him. Not enough to control him fully now, but enough to wound him whenever he resisted. Isolde saw pain seize his face. She let go of the knot with one hand and reached toward him. The silver line between their chests brightened. Rowan stopped rising. Their fingers did not touch. The water between them lit with a memory. Rowan stood in a winter hunting field, blood across his side, one hand gripping Isolde's wrist as wolves circled beyond the trees. He was younger, furious, terrified. If my own mind ever turns against you, he whispered, do not trust my face. Trust what my wolf cannot bury. The memory vanished. Rowan looked at her with horror. I said that. Isolde's voice trembled. Yes. His eyes moved to the wolf shadow pinned behind memory, Rowan. Then we trust him. The wolf shadow rose at the sound. Ice chains cracked along its back. It was not free, not whole, but it was awake enough to choose. It lunged forward, not at Isolde, not at Rowan, but at the silver knot binding the stolen memories. Its teeth sank into one side, while Isolde gripped the other. Memory Rowan bowed his head. Now, he said. Rowan reached them at last and placed his hand over Isolde's bloodied fingers. The contact did not heal. It tore. The lake opened the rejection night fully. The whole pack above saw it projected under the ice. The great hall, the Luna circlet, Isolde standing alone before the throne. Rowan's body stood there too, but his wolf shadow was pinned flat behind him by moon thread. Cerevra stood behind the throne, her staff hidden beneath her sleeve, whispering the rejection into the thread before Rowan's mouth repeated it. The watching wolves on the bank backed away from her. Cerevra's face hardened. She did not deny it. Instead, she struck the lake a third time. The surface above shattered inward, not breaking apart, sealing. White frost raced over every reflection, covering the rejection memory, the vows, the drowned corridor, the wolf shadow. The water around Isolde turned heavy. The throne began to sink faster, dragging memory, Rowan, and the pinned wolf into black depth. Cerevra was not trying to kill Isolde alone. She was drowning the stolen memories before Rowan could reclaim them. Rowan's hand tightened over Isolde's. How do we stop her? Isolde looked at her bleeding palms, at the silver blood spreading through the lake, at the vows waking behind the frost. She finally understood why Cerevra feared glass blood. Water did not obey her. It remembered through her wounds. Isolde pressed both bleeding hands against the knot at memory Rowan's throat. Then remember deeper, she whispered. The lake went black. For one heartbeat, nothing existed but cold. Then every broken vow beneath Glass Lake opened its eyes. The eyes beneath Glass Lake were not human. They opened inside every frozen vow like pale moons underwater, watching from cracks, ripples, and old reflections. Some were wolf eyes. Some were the dim silver eyes of women who had sworn love before being traded for borders. Some belonged to warriors forced to bend the knee after treaties were rewritten in blood. None spoke. They remembered. That was worse. The lake did not rise in accusation. It opened memory in silence, and silence made the pack listen harder than screams ever could. Above the surface, the northern shore broke into panic. Elders backed away from the lake as images spread beneath their boots. A dead Alpha offering surrender with a knife hidden behind his cloak. A Luna signing away her daughter's inheritance, while moon thread tightened around her wrist. A border pack kneeling in snow after a promise of mercy, then being hunted at dawn. Glass Lake had kept all of it, not because it judged, because broken vows had nowhere else to go. Below, Isolde's blood continued to silver the water. The frozen throne was sinking again, but slower now, as if the lake itself hesitated to drag her deeper while using her wounds as a door. Rowan's hand remained over hers on the knot at memory, Rowan's throat. His touch was cold from the water, but beneath it something fierce and living fought to return. The wolf shadow bit the silver knot again. This time the knot split. Memory Rowan gasped. The real Rowan did too. A rush of memories broke free between them, not in order, not gently. Rowan seeing Isolde for the first time across the rain court, her cloak torn, her chin lifted while elders called her unlucky. Rowan's wolf pressing against his ribs with one clear command: mine, but not to own. Rowan standing outside the healer's tower after Cerevra warned him that Isolde's bloodline carried drowned curses, Rowan refusing to listen. Then came pain. The black stone table. Moon, thread. Cerevra's needle. Rowan's own voice, raw with resistance. Do not take her name from me. Isolde nearly lost her grip. Rowan's eyes opened wide in the water. He remembered that one. Not fully, not with peace. It struck him like a blade returning to the wound it made. I fought her, he whispered. Memory Rowan lifted his head, breathing hard, until she used the pack. Another reflection opened. The healer's chamber appeared again, but wider now. Cerevra stood at the black table while elders circled Rowan. One held a list of famine stores, another held the border treaty, a third held the sealed birth records of children from lesser packs. If glass, blood becomes Luna, an elder said, the lake wakes every buried oath, half our alliances collapse. Cerevra's face was pale, not gleeful, afraid. Then his love endangers more than his crown. Rowan, bound to the table, turned his head despite the moon thread cutting into his temples. You fear truth because it would cost you what lies bought. Cerevra leaned over him. I fear a kingdom drowned in old debts. The memory broke. For one breath, Isolde almost understood the healer. That was the cruelest part. Cerevra had not stolen Rowan's memories for simple jealousy. She had done it because glass blood would unravel generations of political survival. Isolde's return as Luna would not merely shame a few elders. It would wake every vow the Northern Throne had buried to keep peace. But peace built over drowned truth had teeth beneath it. Above the lake, Cerevra raised her staff toward the pack. Her voice rang clear, sharpened by desperation. Look at what she opens. Old surrender oaths, dead inheritance claims, border betrayals. If she rises, the lake will not stop with the king. Every family here will bleed for vows spoken by their ancestors. The pack listened. Fear moved through them, ugly and quick. Isolde felt it through the ice. Some of those people had pitied her a moment ago. Now they imagined their own houses exposed beneath the lake, their own titles questioned, their own dead dragged into moonlight. Memory Rowan's gaze darkened. She will turn them against you. She already has, Isolde said. Rowan's hand tightened around hers. Then we do not ask the pack to love truth. We give them no safe lie to stand behind. He pulled the split knot apart. The silver thread tore. Memory Rowan fell forward, and the wolf shadow surged over him, no longer pinned flat. The real Rowan convulsed as the stolen memories slammed into his body. He would have drifted away in the water if Isolde had not caught his armor with one bleeding hand. His eyes changed, not healed, wounded open. He looked at her as if seeing her through 100 returned winters. Isolde. The way he said her name nearly broke what the lake had not. She wanted to lean into it, wanted to let one word undo the rejection, the bank, the circlet, the cold hands that had thrown her into the water. But memory returning was not the same as trust repaired. You remember loving me, she said. His face twisted. Yes. That does not erase what your mouth did before the pack. No. The honesty hurt less than excuse would have. Above them, Cerevra drove her staff into the ice with both hands. The lake ceiling cracked open in a wide white circle. Moon thread poured through like roots, rushing toward Isolde's silver blood. The threads wrapped around the frozen throne and began pulling it upward not to free her, but to expose her before the pack while the lake was still open, while fear could be sharpened into execution. Rowan reached for his sword. It was gone, lost somewhere above the surface. The wolf shadow behind him rose instead. For the first time, it moved with him, not as memory. As part of him, it lunged at the moon thread, tearing several strands apart, but more descended, wrapping around Isolde's wrists, her throat, the arms of the frozen throne. Her blood brightened where the threads touched. The lake began showing new memories. Not Rowan's. Hers. A little girl cutting her palm on a cracked wash basin and watching the water turn silver. her mother's terrified hands covering the bowl, a whispered warning. Never bleed near still water. Never cry where the moon can see it. Never let a king know what your blood remembers. Isolde froze. Rowan saw it too. You knew? He asked. No, she whispered. I was made afraid before I was old enough to understand why. The throne surged upward. The lake threw them toward the surface. Water shattered around Isolde as the frozen seat rose back into moonlight, dragging Rowan beside it in a burst of silver spray. He landed on one knee on the ice steps, coughing lake water, one hand still gripping the frozen arm of her throne. The pack stared at him, then at Isolde. Moonthread bound her to the ice, her bleeding hands glowing silver, the lake beneath her filled with open eyes and broken vows. Zarevra stepped forward. You see her now. Glass. Blood does not free truth. It drowns kingdoms in memory. Rowan slowly rose. His face was pale. His returned memories had not made him softer. They had made him dangerous. She did not drown me, he said. Zarevra's eyes flashed. Because she needs you alive to legitimize her curse. Rowan looked at the pack, then at the broken Luna circlet still lying on the altar. He walked to it, picked up one half, and turned back to Isolde. The entire shore held its breath. But before he could speak, the lake behind Isolde rose into a wall of clear ice. Inside, it appeared one final hidden memory. Zarevra kneeling alone at the water's edge years earlier, weeping as she pressed a dead child's silver bracelet into the lake. If glass, blood returns, her younger voice whispered. Let me bury the truth before it takes another air. The pack went silent. Zarevra's staff slipped in her hand, and Isolde understood that the healer had not begun with ambition. She had begun with grief. The ice held Zarevra's younger face in perfect cruelty. Not because she looked cruel then, because she looked broken. The memory inside the wall showed her kneeling at the edge of Glass Lake with a dead child's silver bracelet in both hands, her healer's robe soaked to the knees, her hair undone by wind and grief. No priestesses stood behind her. No elders whispered orders. No crown watched from the bank. She had come alone, and that loneliness made the memory harder to hate. Isolde felt the pack's judgment waver. Pity was dangerous in a crowd. It could be turned like a blade. Zarevra slowly lifted her staff from the ice. Her face had gone pale, but not ashamed. You wanted the truth beneath my hands, she said. There it is. Rowan stood between her and Isolde, lake water dripping from his armor, one half of the broken Luna circlet clenched in his fist. His returned memories had changed the way he held himself. He still looked like an Alpha King, still severe, still capable of violence, but there was a wound behind his eyes now that had not been there on the bank before. What child? He asked. Zarevra looked at the bracelet frozen in memory. My son. A stir moved through the pack. Isolde had never heard that Zarevra had a child. Neither, from Rowan's stillness, had he. Zarevra's mouth tightened. He was born during the border peace. His father was from the Western Pack. A vow kept him safe. A vow written by men who smiled over a treaty table and buried knives beneath it. The ice memory shifted. A boy no older than 7 ran across a summer courtyard with a silver bracelet flashing at his wrist. Then the image changed to smoke, hoofbeats, wolves at the border, a treaty seal broken in secret, men shouting that no vow existed. A small body wrapped in healer's white. Zarevra's voice roughened. Glass. Blood woke that vow too late. The lake remembered after he was dead. Isolde's bound hands throbbed against the moon thread. There it was. Not jealousy, not hunger for Rowan, not simple power. Grief sharpened into doctrine. Zarevra had seen truth arrive too late and decided late truth was more dangerous than silence. The pack felt it. Isolde could feel them wanting to understand her. Rowan's voice remained low. So you buried every vow after that. I buried the ones that would break the kingdom open. You stole my love. I saved your reign. You made me wound her. Zarevra's chaze cut to Isolde. And if I had not? Glass, blood, would have risen through your Luna. Every old oath beneath this lake would have opened. Border claims, murdered heirs, false surrenders, hidden mate bonds. The North would have drowned in righteous revenge. The lake beneath Isolde darkened. Not in agreement. In warning, The wall of ice behind her filled with more old vows, pressing forward like faces behind glass. The pack saw enough to fear themselves. Names carved out of inheritance lines, marriages forced to seal stolen land, children hidden under false house marks. No family on that bank seemed untouched. A nobleman whispered, "Seal the lake." Another answered, "Let the healer finish it." Rowan turned sharply toward them, but Isolde spoke first. "No." The moon thread around her throat tightened as she used her voice. Pain flashed white behind her eyes, but she did not lower her head. Cerevra's eyes narrowed. "You would open them all?" "No." Isolde looked past her, to the wall of vows, to the old dead watching beneath the frozen surface. "That is what you want them to fear." Silence spread. Isolde's silver blood moved through the lake in thin, bright veins. For the first time, she did not fight its pull. She listened. Not to every vow, not to every grief, only to the water beneath her own wounds. Glass Lake did not demand that all truth be spilled at once. It remembered what had been broken. Remembering was not the same as revenge. Isolde pressed her bleeding palms against the ice arms of the throne. Hold. The lake stilled. The wall of old vows stopped advancing. A tremor moved through the shore. The wolves felt it, the sudden restraint, the impossible mercy of a power choosing not to devour them with their ancestors' sins. Cerevra's face changed. For the first time, she looked afraid of Isolde, not because Isolde might destroy the kingdom, but because she might prove destruction had never been the only answer. Rowan saw it. So did the elders. Isolde lifted her head. "You told them glass. Blood drowns kingdoms in memory. But you never feared memory alone. You feared memory without your hand around its throat." The words struck. Cerevra's grief hardened again, turning back into command, because command was safer than pain. Mercy from an untrained bride is still a blade. "She is not your bride to name," Rowan said. The pack looked at him. Isolde did too. His jaw tightened, as if he knew how easily protection could become possession in front of frightened witnesses. He lowered the broken half of the Luna circlet instead of raising it. "And she is not mine to restore before she chooses what my rejection cost her." The admission moved through Isolde quietly. Not healing, not enough, but real. Cerevra hated it. She reached into her robe and drew out a small silver bracelet, the same one from the memory. Not a vision now, the true object. Tarnished, child-sized, wrapped in moon thread. The lake recoiled beneath Isolde's throne. Rowan stepped forward. "Cerevra." She ignored him. Her eyes were wet now, but her hand did not shake. "My son died because truth came too late. I will not let this kingdom die because it comes all at once." She pressed the bracelet against the ice. The moon thread around it sank into Glass Lake like roots. The dark eye beneath Isolde opened wide. Every vow the lake had been holding still began to pull inward, not toward the shore, not toward Isolde, but toward the bracelet. Cerevra was not sealing the lake. She was feeding it a grief old enough to command a drowned thing. The ice beneath the throne cracked. Rowan reached for Isolde, but a wall of glass rose between them. Inside that wall, a new shape formed beneath the water, a child's shadow made of silver frost, holding hundreds of broken vows in its small hands. Isolde's breath caught. The lake had remembered Cerevra's son, but grief had made him monstrous. The child shadow lifted its face toward Isolde, then spoke with Rowan's stolen voice. "Give me the bond, and I will let the king forget pain forever." The offer hung inside the glass wall like a lullaby sung from a grave. Isolde felt Rowan go still on the other side of the barrier. Not because he wanted to forget her, because pain had become the first honest thing returned to him. It stood in his face now. Every stolen winter, every false word, every moment his body had obeyed a rejection his wolf had fought. To remember love was not only to regain tenderness, it was to receive guilt with both hands and no armor. The child shadow beneath the lake understood that better than any elder on the shore. It lifted its small silver face toward Rowan through the ice. Its eyes were not cruel. That made it worse. They were hollow with grief that had never been allowed to grow older. "Give me the bond," it whispered again, still using Rowan's buried voice, "and I will leave him clean." Cerevra stood with one hand pressed to the ice, the bracelet caught beneath her palm. Tears brightened her lashes, but she did not step back. "You see?" she said to Isolde, voice trembling. "Even the lake knows mercy can be forgetting." "No," Isolde said. "That is not mercy, that is burial." The moon thread around her throat tightened until her next breath scraped. The frozen throne cracked beneath her hips, dropping a handspan toward the dark water. The child shadow opened its fingers. Hundreds of broken vows fluttered there like silver moths with torn wings. Rowan struck the glass wall with his fist. It did not break. "Isolde." His voice carried through the ice, rough and newly full of everything Cerevra had tried to remove. Not command, not possession, fear. The sound steadied her more than any vow could have. She looked at the child shadow. "You are not her son." Cerevra flinched. The shadow tilted its head. "You are what the lake kept when grief had nowhere honest to go," Isolde said. "A bracelet, a broken treaty, a mother's scream, a child's name no court wanted to pay for." The shore grew silent. Cerevra's face twisted. "Do not speak of him. I'm speaking to what you made of him." The lake darkened under the words, not angry, but listening. Isolde pressed her bleeding palms harder against the frozen arms of the throne. Her silver blood ran into the cracks and spread through them slowly, deliberately, no longer flooding every old vow at once. She had tried to push memory open. Now she did something harder. She asked it to separate. Not all grief was truth. Not all pain was justice. The child shadow looked down at its own hands. The vows it held began to loosen, one by one. A border oath slid away from its fingers. A false inheritance record drifted back into the lake. A dead Luna's promise settled into a separate pane of ice, no longer tangled around the small silver bracelet. Cerevra husped. "Stop." Isolde did not. The lake showed the boy again, not as a monster of frost, but as he had been, 7 years old, laughing in a summer courtyard, bracelet flashing at his wrist while Cerevra watched from a balcony with tired tenderness. The memory was brief, small, alive. The child shadow trembled. Its mouth opened, but Rowan's stolen voice did not come out this time. A child's voice did. "Mother?" Cerevra broke. Her staff slipped from her hand and struck the ice with a hollow sound. For one breath, the powerful moon healer vanished, and only a woman remained, staring at what grief had disguised in the lake. "My son," she whispered. The moon thread weakened around Isolde's throat. Rowan saw it and drove his shoulder into the glass wall. A crack flashed across the barrier, but it held. His wolf shadow rose behind him on the ice, no longer pinned, no longer separated from his body. It struck the same crack with both forepaws. The wall groaned. Cerevra sank to one knee, reaching toward the boy shape beneath the water. "I only wanted no mother to learn too late." The lake answered through the ice. "Then you made all mothers wait beneath lies." The words were not spoken aloud. They moved through every wolf on the bank as cold pressure, the way old water pressed against stone. Cerevra bowed over the bracelet. For the first time, she looked ashamed. But shame did not undo spell work. The child shadow's body began to fracture. Without the tangled vows feeding it, the grief form could not hold its shape. The bracelet glowed white beneath the ice, pulling one last thread with it. The mate bond. Isolde felt it tear from her chest. She screamed. Rowan shouted and struck the wall again. The crack spread from top to bottom. The child shadow looked at Isolde with frightened eyes. It did not understand what it held. It had been built to gather pain and carry it where no one had to face it. Now, without Cerevra's command, it clutched the brightest thread because that was the one everyone feared losing. Isolde reached toward it. The frozen throne finally released her shoulders, but the moon thread still bound her wrists. She leaned forward as far as the ice allowed. "Listen to me," she whispered. "That bond is not yours to carry." The child shadow shook. "It hurts him." "Yes." "It hurts you." "Yes." "Then why keep it?" Isolde looked through the cracked wall at Rowan. Water ran down his face. His hand was pressed to the glass opposite hers, and behind him, his wolf shadow bled silver light into the fracture, fighting not to own her, not to command her back, but to reach the truth beside her. "Because pain is not prtut, that love was false," she said. The lake stilled. The child shadow looked at the bond in its hands. Then slowly, it released one end. The silver thread snapped back into Isolde's chest with such force that her vision went white. The other end flew toward Rowan, passing through the glass wall just as it shattered under his wolf's final blow. Rowan caught the bond against his heart. The impact drove him to his knees. Every memory Cerevra had stolen returned at once. He bent over the ice, one hand clenched at his chest, the other reaching for Isolde through the broken barrier, his face twisted with grief so raw the pack looked away. Isolde fell from the frozen throne into shallow lake water. Rowan caught her before her knees struck the ice. For one breath, he held her too tightly. Then he loosened his grip at once, as if remembering that returned love did not erase the wound of rejection. "I remember," he said. His voice broke. Isolde looked up at him, shaking, bleeding, alive. "Then remember this too," she whispered. "I am not healed because you are sorry." Rowan flinched, but he did not deny it. Above them, Cerevra lifted the silver bracelet from the melting ice. The child's shadow had become a small light cupped around it, fading peacefully now that it no longer carried a kingdom's buried vows. The moon healer looked at Isolde through tears. "I cannot stop what wakes next." The lake beneath them turned black and clear. Far below, under every reflection, a sealed door of glass appeared. On it were carved hundreds of Luna names. At the center, written in frost around Isolde's own reflection, were 3 words the pack had buried for generations. "Glass blood remembers queens." The words beneath the lake did not glow like prophecy. They looked carved by cold hands that had run out of time. "Glass blood remembers queens." Isolde stared through the black, clear water at the sealed door below, her body trembling in Rowan's arms, her bleeding palms pressed against ice that no longer felt like prison. Around them, the shattered wall drifted in pieces. Cerevra knelt near the melting bracelet, the small light of her sun fading into the silver surface like a candle finally allowed to go out. Above the water, the northern pack waited in terrified silence. They could see the door too. They could see the names. Hundreds of Luna names had been carved into the glass, some bright, some nearly erased, some scratched over by hands that had wanted history to look cleaner than it was. Isolde recognized none of them, yet the lake under her blood recognized all. Rowan looked down at the door. "What is that?" Isolde's chest ached where the mate bond had returned. It was whole now, but not gentle. Truth never returned gently after being held underwater. "I think it is where they put the queens no one wanted remembered." Cerevra lifted her head. Her face was wet, not from lake water alone. Not only queens. The pack turned toward her. For the first time that night, the moon healer did not speak like someone holding law in her mouth. She sounded tired enough to be honest. Lunas who refused false treaties, brides who remembered murder vows, women whose blood made water keep what councils tried to drown. Her fingers closed around the silver bracelet. The North called them dangerous because they could not be made to forget politely. Rowan's jaw tightened. "And you buried Isolde among them before she ever ruled?" "I buried what she could wake." "No," Isolde's voice came thin, but steady. "You buried what others did." Cerevra flinched. The lake answered Isolde's blood. The sealed door did not open. Instead, one name at its center cleared from frost. Maren. Not Isolde's name. Her mother's. The ice beneath Isolde's knees softened into a reflection. A woman with Isolde's same dark hair stood years earlier at the shore of Glass Lake, holding a baby wrapped in gray wool. Her face was young, frightened, and fiercely composed. Cerevra stood before her, not yet the royal healer, still wearing a trainee's moon thread around her wrists. "She cannot stay near the lake," young Cerevra said. Isolde's mother held the baby closer. "Then keep her name out of your records. She is glass blood. She is a child. She will grow. And if she grows kind?" Young Cerevra looked toward the water, where grief already lived in her eyes. "Kindness does not stop memory." The reflection faded. Isolde could not breathe. Her mother had known. Her mother had hidden her, not because she was ashamed, but because she understood what the pack would do with a girl whose blood made still water remember. Rowan's hand hovered near Isolde's back, then settled lightly, only when she did not pull away. It was careful, too careful. That care nearly hurt more than his grip in the lake had. "They took this from you too," he said. Isolde looked at the names below. "Not all of it." The sealed door trembled. Cerevra saw it and rose too quickly. Do not open that door. The old fear returned to her voice. A few elders seized upon it. Seal it. If the queen door opens, every Luna claim can be challenged. Every old marriage oath. Every succession. Rowan turned toward them with a look that cut the voices short. Good. Fear rippled along the bank. Isolde touched his wrist. No. He looked at her, startled. She understood the anger in him. She felt its twin in herself. But anger would open the lake like a wound and let every buried vow bleed into the same water. That was what Cerevra had feared. That was what the elders could use against her. Glass blood did not have to drown kingdoms in memory. It had to choose where truth began. Isolde pulled herself free of Rowan's arms and stood on the shallow ice. Her legs shook, but she did not fall. The mate bond brightened between them, visible for one breath as a pale line of silver light. The pack saw it. No one could call it broken now. Cerevra stared at it with despair. Isolde faced her. You said truth came too late for your son. It did. Then do not make it late again. The moon healer's mouth trembled. You cannot understand what it costs to wake a lake full of grief. No, Isolde said. But I understand being punished for what others are afraid to remember. She knelt and pressed both bleeding hands to the black clear ice above the queen door. Not every vow, not every name. This one. The lake listened. The hundreds of carved Luna names dimmed until only 3 remained bright. Maren, Isolde, and one name beneath them, nearly scraped away. Aurelia Glass Veyne, the first Luna of the northern pack. The door opened a handspan. Cold rose from below, carrying no scream, no flood, no swarm of accusations. Only one reflection. A woman crowned in frost stood beside the first northern Alpha before this same lake. Her palms were cut, silver blood dripping into the water. Around them, wolves knelt with heads lowered not in worship, but agreement. Aurelia spoke without sound, yet every wolf on the bank understood through the ice. When love is stolen from a bonded ruler, the lake shall not judge the abandoned mate. It shall keep the missing heart until both halves stand before it. Rowan went utterly still. Isolde felt the words enter the bond. Not as command, as restoration. The reflection shifted. Aurelia turned her face toward Isolde, and for one impossible breath, the ancient Luna looked less like a ghost than a woman recognizing a descendant who had arrived wounded but awake. The door opened wider. Cerevra staggered back. No. The elders began shouting. Rowan drew himself to full height. Enough. His voice carried across water, ice, and wolves. I rejected Isolde Maren before this pack, he said. My mouth spoke the words. My memory was stolen, my wolf was bound, and my shadow was held. But the wound landed on her. Let no one call her restored simply because I remember. The pack lowered its gaze. Isolde's throat tightened. Rowan turned to her, not reaching this time. I cannot undo the bank. I cannot unmake the lake. I cannot ask your bond to heal on my command. The honesty held more weight than any vow. Cerevra stepped forward with the bracelet clutched to her chest. And if she opens the queen door fully? If she becomes what the first Lunas were? Isolde looked down. The black clear water beneath her feet had begun to rise inside the open door, shaping itself into a crown of frozen glass. Not a Luna circlet. Not the one broken on the altar. Older, sharper, made from remembered vows. The lake lifted it slowly toward her. The pack began to kneel, not all at once, not beautifully, not from loyalty, from the terrible pressure of recognizing a law older than their fear. Rowan remained standing. So did Isolde. The crown stopped between them, hovering above the ice. Then every reflection in Glass Lake went dark, except one. Cerevra's face appeared beneath the crown, older than grief, colder than healing, speaking to someone hidden beyond the memory. If the lake ever crowns her, the memory of Cerevra said, kill the king before he remembers enough to stand beside her. Rowan turned. Too late. An elder on the bank drew a moon-thread blade and drove it toward his back. The blade never reached Rowan's heart. Isolde moved before thought could become fear. The glass crown hovering above the lake flashed once, and the water beneath her feet rose in a thin, clear wall between Rowan and the elder's hand. The moon-thread blade struck the wall point first and stopped there, trapped inside the ice, as if the lake had caught not the weapon, but the intention behind it. Rowan turned. The elder froze with one hand still around the hilt. His name was Lord Carwyn Holt, one of the oldest voices on the Northern Council, a man who had lowered his head during Isolde's rejection and looked sorrowful enough to seem innocent. Now his face was white, his wolf shadow twisting behind him like smoke caught in a snare. Rowan's eyes went cold. "You would strike your king in the back." Carwyn's mouth trembled. "I would save the pack from a crowned glass blood." The lake darkened beneath the trapped blade. Isolde felt its search for the vow behind the act. Not all vows. Not the whole drowned history of the North. Only this one. The water had learned restraint through her blood, and that made its memory sharper. A reflection opened inside the ice wall. Cerevra stood years earlier in the healer's tower, younger but already hollowed by grief. Before her knelt 3 elders, including Carwyn. On the table between them lay Rowan's signet ring, Isolde's hidden birth record, and the dead child's silver bracelet. "If the lake crowns her," the memory of Cerevra said, voice shaking, "the king will remember. If he remembers, he will stand with her. If he stands with her, every buried vow opens." Carwyn asked, "Then what is your command?" Cerevra closed her eyes. When she opened them, grief had turned into law. Kill him before he chooses her. The reflection ended. The shore fell silent. Not shocked silence. Worse, recognizing silence. Cerevra swayed, as if the memory had struck her body. "I gave that order before I knew how much I had already buried." Carwyn tightened his grip on the blade. "And you were right." He pulled. The blade did not move. Isolde stepped closer, the glass crown still hovering above the ice between her and Rowan. Moonlight shone through her wet hair, through the silver blood drying on her palms, through the bond glowing faintly between her chest and Rowan's. "You are afraid I will open every oath," she said. Carwyn's eyes burned. "You will." "No." She looked at the lake. "I will open the ones used as weapons against the living." The ice wall cracked. The blade dissolved into water. Carwyn stumbled back, suddenly empty-handed. Rowan moved then, swift and brutal. His wolf shadow surged behind him as he seized the elder by the throat and drove him to his knees on the frozen bank. Every wolf in the pack felt the alpha power behind it and bowed without command. But Rowan did not kill him. His gaze shifted to Isolde. Not asking permission to be king, remembering that justice could no longer be shaped without the woman his court had tried to drown. Isolde looked at Carwyn. She wanted anger to make her simple. It would have been easier to demand blood. The lake would have remembered that too. It would have carried the murder into some future night, waiting for another wounded woman to open it. She took a breath. "Let him live long enough to hear the names," she said. Rowan released Carwyn. The elder collapsed onto the ice, coughing, humiliated before the same pack that had watched Isolde thrown into the lake. Cerevra dropped her staff. The sound was small, but every head turned. The moon healer walked to the water's edge and knelt. Her fingers opened around the silver bracelet of her dead son. The small light within it flickered once, gentle now, no longer swollen with other people's grief. "I thought forgetting was mercy," Cerevra said. No one answered. She looked at Isolde. It was only another drowning. The admission did not heal what she had done. Isolde did not offer forgiveness because the court wanted the comfort of it. She only watched as Cerevra placed the bracelet on the ice. Glass Lake received it without swallowing. A clear pain formed beneath the bracelet, holding the boy's true memory apart from the stolen vows. Not erased, not weaponized, remembered as himself. Cerevra bowed her head and wept without sound. The lake stilled. The queen door below opened wider. This time no flood of old accusations rose. Instead, the names carved beneath the water brightened one by one, each remaining behind its own pane of ice, held separate, waiting to be heard in its proper season. The pack saw the difference. The lake was not a monster under Isolde's blood. It was an archive of wounds that had been denied shape. The glass crown descended. It stopped above Isolde's brow. The entire shore held its breath. Rowan did not reach for it. He did not crown her. He did not lift the broken Luna circlet from the altar and pretend the wound could be repaired by ceremony. He stood before her soaked in lake water, returned memories raw in his eyes, and lowered himself to one knee. The pack gasped. "Isolde, still." "Do not," she whispered. Rowan looked up at her. "This is not a claim." "Then what is it?" "Witness." His voice carried across the bank. I rejected Isolde Maren with a stolen mind and a bound wolf, but the wound was real because she bore it. Let every wolf here remember. A restored memory does not erase public harm. A king who has been used must still answer for what was done through his mouth. Isolde's throat tightened until breathing hurt. Rowan lowered his head. I ask no bond from you tonight. I ask no forgiveness before witnesses. I ask only the right to spend whatever remains of my reign, proving that the lake should never have had to speak for you. The glass crown trembled above her. Isolde looked at it, then at the broken Luna circlet on the altar, then at the lake where hundreds of forgotten queens waited under ice for someone brave enough not to use them all at once. She lifted both hands. The crown did not settle on her head. It broke apart into 7 clear shards and circled her palms like frozen moonlight. The pack murmured in fear. Isolde understood what the lake offered now. Not a throne. Not yet. A key. I will not be crowned by the same knight that tried to drown me, she said. Rowan's eyes lifted. But I will open the queen door, one name at a time, one vow at a time. No house will be ruined by rumor. No grief will be allowed to wear another child's face. No healer, elder, king, or Luna will bury love and call it peace. The lake answered by shining beneath her feet. Wolves along the bank lowered their heads, not to a crowned Luna, not to a rejected bride restored for their comfort, but to the woman the glass lake had refused to drown. Rowan rose slowly. He did not touch her until she offered her hand. When her silver-blooded fingers entered his, the mate bond between them brightened, wounded, living, no longer hidden beneath the lake. His thumb brushed the cuts on her palm, careful as a vow learning humility. I remember loving you, he said quietly. Isolde looked at him through the cold dawn mist. Then learn me again. Pain crossed his face. Then something steadier. I will. Behind them, Glass Lake released one final reflection onto the surface. Rowan in the frost garden, whispering that he would rather lose the crown than forget her. The image did not stay to accuse him. It dissolved into mourning. Sorevra was taken from the bank without chains, because Isolde ordered no spectacle. Her punishment would be harder than death. She would live to separate every grief she had tangled, every vow she had buried, every memory she had stolen, in the name of mercy. Lord Cerwyn and the elders were stripped of council voice until their house vows could be opened before the lake. And Isolde Maren, still wet from the water meant to kill her, walked up the moon steps beside Rowan Veyne, not behind him, not claimed beneath him, not healed because the truth had finally become visible. Beside him, at the white moon arch, she stopped and looked back. The glass lake lay calm beneath the dawn, clear enough to show the queen door waiting below. Her reflection stood on the surface, crowned not with ice, but with 7 shards of remembered moonlight around her hands. The lake had not proven her bond. It had returned the part of Rowan that had been stolen, and revealed the part of Isolde that had been hidden. When the first sunlight touched the broken Luna circlet on the altar, the silver halves melted into water and ran back to the lake. Isolde felt the bond in her chest answer once, not as a chain, as a door